r/AskReddit. What's the worst case of rich kid syndrome you've seen? This is pretty tame, but it's what I got. I used to work as an after-school babysitter for a loaded doctor couple with 2 kids. My job was mainly to pick up the younger kid from school and hang out till his parents got home. He was a good kid, but coddled and immature. He was in 5th or 6th grade at this point. Oftentimes he would not be at his classroom when I came to get him, and the school campus was huge. Different buildings, courtyards, playgrounds, the works. If he wasn't at his classroom I had to comb the whole campus, and he was rarely in the same place twice. He had a cell phone, but usually ignored its existence except for playing games on it in the car. The school was in the city, and I had to park on the street. A couple of times I wound up with parking tickets because, despite having stuffed the meter with enough quarters to presumably result in ample time, the search for my charge would take much longer than anticipated. After a point, I mentioned this to him, calmly asking that he respect my time and stay in a set location so that I don't end up with a $25 ticket again. He looked at me with a good-natured shrug and said, "Well, that's not much. You can afford that. Sonny, your parents paid me $140 a week, and I was in college. I know you live in a $1.4 million house and your dad buys you an expensive new toy every Sunday, but with the money they're forking over for your education someone ought to have taught you the value of a dollar by now." But honestly, he was a nice kid. They moved away, and I hope he's doing well. I could absolutely survive on my own. My parents just pay for my food and house, but I pay for everything else. If I got a job I could pay for my food and house too, said at 18, in the middle of a discussion between 2 middle-class peers who were talking about saving money because they had to pay for their own college and living expenses. About 5 minutes prior to this conversation, both peers had ordered the cheap dinner options and declined a shopping trip later that night, while rich girl was talking non-stop about buying the best/most expensive souvenirs for her friends. Once tried working a regular person retail job and quit within a couple weeks as it just wasn't right and I didn't like it. Read had actual responsibilities for the first time. Moved cross country for an 8-month education course where her parents pay food, rent, and school. They also gave her a debit card which replenishes up to $500 when it hits $50. She still posts Snapchats with captions of that broke person life over pictures of her getting Starbucks every day and insists she could survive on her own. Constantly suggests the most expensive options for meals, activities, etc. and tax on things, like we can just split the bill. I know you're saving but it's just, amount at least $50. You'll be fine, right? Then gets upset when people can't afford to spend time with her or when someone dares to suggest that she helps cover costs. Friend got a theater with an arcade built over their family's 12-car garage. Parents didn't want the 5-year-old sister to be jealous, so they hired an architect to design and built her a fully functioning playhouse with a bathroom, and bedroom. Just the tip of the iceberg with this family though. Update, lots of comments. I will try to round out the image. And for what it's worth, no, neither Ryan nor my family is rich. We just lived really close to the family and my dad and mother became close friends with them. They were on the whole really nice and innocent people drunken on the spoils of wealth. I can say I genuinely love the family. Firstly, one commenter was correct. This is not really rich kid syndrome. And no, these are not normal rich people. These are ultra rich, probably richer now than they were then. For example, George Bush Jr. visited the family's house to hold a fundraiser for his second campaign. This was not a typical rich family. Their father built a mini racetrack for his Lotus Esprits at his lake house. Also built a mega yacht with a garage for what most of us would consider a large boat on it. Surprise, he never really used it more than once or twice. An impulse purchase. The house, more aptly called a castle, was filled with game from African safaris taken in the 70s and 80s. The wife bought a popular fast food franchise unavailable in our area because she didn't like having to drive 30 minutes to get what she wanted. Once when I was swimming in the waterfall pool with the son, my mom called and reminded them I need to be home for some sports event or something, and we hopped in their Bentley dripping wet. It was the first time my feet ever touched a fur floor in a car, soaking wet at that. At the millennium, the father was into tattoos and regularly spent tens of thousands to fly the best tattoo artists in world and from Japan and LA to work on his Yakuza style sash tattoo. I could go on and on. But the number one thing that I think might qualify one in the family for rich kid syndrome is that the father, who inherited his family business from his father, sold the business overseas in the late 80s. The company was the only reason the town had to exist. Ever since, the community has been recognized as the most depressed in the state, and the school's unequivocally the worst. Got paid $250. It was a lot more back in the 1900s to clean out a rich guy's garage. We could keep anything we wanted after letting him look at it first. He never kept anything we showed him, but we sure did. It just wasn't worth the guy's time to look at this junk, let alone go through it all and sort out what they were keeping. Wife's clothes and accessories, mostly, and high-end sporting gear like fishing poles and home gyms for him, and what we set aside for the charity people to pick up. I suspect most of it was picked up by neighbors before the charity people got to it, but whatever. Among the things we kept, original sit-down style 2-player Space Invaders cabinet, not working when we found it, but we fixed it easily once we got it home. Perfectly fine pinball cabinet, old school with no digital displays, but very retro, even in the 90s, and very cool. Giant coolers, kitchen gear, plates, and utensils. Basically we outfitted our bachelor pad kitchen top to bottom. Automatic frozen drink maker, like you see in bars, but they are always broken because they are a pain in the ass to operate and even worse to clean. Several pounds of frozen grass-fed beef, wild boar ribs, and organic free-range venison of unknown age. I would never eat it now, but back then, we did not gaff, and it tasted amazing. One of my ribs had a bullet hole in it that we found after smoking them. A deep freezer to store all the frozen meat. He didn't care at all about the value of the things. He glanced at them, confirmed he didn't want them in his garage anymore, and we made them disappear. Then we got fed, and then we got paid 10/10ths would work under the table cleaning up after dumb rich guys anytime. My friend from high school. Her parents forced her to major in biology to be pre-med when she started college. She made a really big deal about absolutely needing to change her major, or it would affect her mental health. So she changed her major to philosophy, open bracket underscore, close bracket. After college, she's floundering and wants to move to California to work for a record company. She wants to do the thing in the movies, where they get a job in the mailroom and work their way up. I think this sounds noble, if idealistic. But her parents won't let her. I was confused as to how this had any bearing on her decision, since we were already well into adulthood. We were like 23, but I felt very adult-y at the time, lol, and she could pick up and move if it meant that much to her. More on this later. Then, she gets her parents to give her seed money to start this website. Of course, after like 2 years of effort, that went nowhere. So then, she takes a couple of extra classes, applies, gets into, and starts law school. Decides she hates it, quits. In the meantime, she's living at home, and her parents are paying all of her bills. She's never had a job. Now, we are late 20s, and she's tossing around the record company idea again. Now I find out why her parents' opinion was so important before. She didn't want to go live in a crappy apartment with crappy roommates because she made minimum wage. She wanted her parents to pay all of her living expenses while she was in California, and at her comfort level, that would likely have added up to $5,000 a month or more. So, then she finally stopped talking about that and started going back to the idea of medical school. We in our mid-30s, and she occasionally mentions having taken a chemistry course or something to prep for the MC80. Meanwhile, she's still never had a paycheck aside from what her mom pays her to be the office manager at her business. And a few years back her parents bought her a house probably worth $800,000 which she doesn't live in for some reason. She still lives in her room from high school, just throws parties there every few months. Also, if she's out shopping and sees a Prada or Chanel thing that she likes, she will drop $3,000 without batting an eyelash. I keep thinking she'll learn, she'll get better, she'll find some purpose. And I'm continually disappointed. She's actually pretty smart and determined, but so spoiled with rich kid stuff that the stuff has become her priority rather than any career aspiration she may have. You don't have to be rich to have this syndrome. My parents make decent money for where we live, but at the cost of long hours and being very frugal. My brother went to college on a soccer scholarship to a private university. Scholarship covered half tuition, but my dad paid most of the remaining for the first semester, like $10k. Got kicked out within a month for being a shitbag, disrespecting professors, keeping his hard-working dorm mate up until 3 AM, since he would play video games loudly, drink and smoke weed all day instead of studying, and breaking into people's rooms. The final straw was threatening to shoot people who were bad-mouthing him, leading the dean to saying he would either report him to the police or give him the choice to get a mental evaluation at a hospital. Parents forced him to the hospital to avoid the massive legal trouble he would be in, and he showed no appreciation. They moved him to another location, but since he was 18 they couldn't disclose to where, and my brother, thinking my parents were out to get him, decided not to tell them, and that after he got out he probably is never coming home again. 3 days later he comes home because he was let out and had nowhere to go. Since he didn't contact my parents they could not put down their insurance, so he amassed an extremely high medical bill since they also ambulanced him around for transport on top of all the hefty hospital and psych ward charges. Once home his behavior did not change. Stealing liquor to sell to underage kids to buy booze, asking my parents for money to buy food, and stealing an extra $20 from their wallet to buy weed, selling off electronics, pretty much just bringing in dirt bags into the house and saying take what you want, pay me in weed. Stole mom's credit card to buy games on the PlayStation store, and all during this time he got like 4 $200 tickets for weed possession, many speeding and trespassing tickets, and even a misdemeanor shoplifting charge. Dad, being a good guy, used some savings to pay for these tickets and lawyers to keep him out of prison. Dad at this point falls into depression, feeling like a failed father and doesn't know what to do. On one hand he says bailing him out is ruining him, and on the other letting him deal with it on his own would ruin his life potential to have a good career. At this point I was finishing college and worked extra hard to land a good corporate job so he can at least have some satisfaction in knowing that he is a good father. Stealing continues, but he joins a pyramid scheme. I markets live to make money. Shit talks entire family how we are all being scammed, working 9-5s, how our bosses are laughing all to the way to the bank at our expense. At this point he, a grown 18-year-old man, still needs money for gas and McDonald's. We never wore designer clothes, but he pretty much forces my mom to buy him nice things so he can flex how successful his pyramid scheme is on social media. Every time we went for a family dinner he would order steak and lobster to post online and brag about success, while Dad picked up the tab. We ate at mid-range places and everyone else's meal would be $25 each. His would be $60 plus. The guy didn't even like lobster, just got it to flex. Kept up with the pyramid scheme and was up to making like a steady $36 a week. Kept bragging to my parents that top earners make $100k a week, and he said in 3 months he will be buying a house in the expensive part of town where homes are $1M plus. Cue him and his pyramid scheme bud is wasting real estate agents' time by getting showings of these homes, mostly to walk around and post videos on Snapchat of them making moves. 3 months come and go, and, as all pyramid schemes end up, he still had no money. At this point my parents gave him next to no money. If his car needed gas my dad would personally drive it down the street to the station and put in $10 of gas. Mom would give him $5 for food and that's it. I guess this was good, because by having freedom to move around, but having no money led him to buying weed on credit from his dealers to using the few good honest friends he had loan him money. After no payment to anyone, he lost a good amount of these people as friends. He decided he wants an iPhone instead of our Galaxy S phones, which came out just a couple months ago, so he goes to the store to add it to our family plan. Since he is without parents they do not let him add it to the plan, so he signs himself up for a $120 a month plan and trades in his old $600 phone for like $100. Dad is still locked under contract, so he is still paying for his old line, and since my brother can't afford his phone bill my dad takes over since he needs contact with him in case he fucks up and needs to call for help. After 2 more months of the pyramid scheme and a weekend trip to Vegas for the pyramid scheme convention, he somehow managed to pay for himself $80 flight and split a Airbnb with friends. He was still pulling in almost no money and his own investments led him to lose the rest. After another month of daily meetings, it's bucks to no success. He figured he needs to make more money on other ways. Doesn't get a regular job, so he puts out advertisements to shovel snow for people for $10. Payment taken in advance. Turns out he took on more customers than he could and doesn't shovel all their driveways after a snowstorm. Cue an entire town's community page being angry at him for scamming some of them. Threats of legal action, etc. Dad forces him to go return the money he took for uncompleted services. Family parties would happen, and he would talk big all the time. He thought since he was 18 no one could tell him what to do, since he was his own legal guardian. Family says he should be more respectful as my parents may kick him out of the house. He says no parents would kick their 18-year-old son out. I loved the look on his face when everyone laughed at him and told him that many 18-year-olds are kicked out of the house. He still drives around everywhere, even though he only has 3 gallons of gas in the tank and no gas money. There were probably 5 times his car ran out of gas and he just ditched it and walked home. Me and my dad had to personally go get it back while he just went to sleep. Car was taken away from him. This upset him, and he says he will trade in my dad's car and use the money to buy his own car so my dad could not take it away anymore. We laughed, but in his mind, that somehow made perfect sense. The dealer told him he needs a title to trade in, and that was the end of that. At this point he is literally out of options. AMD at the lowest point of his life. Parents tell him to go to the local community college and they will pay for it. $2.5k a semester. And he has the audacity to ask what's in it for me. The college is 5 minutes from my parents' house, but he says he will go if they rent him an apartment in a certain neighborhood to live in while he went, which was a 35-minute drive from the college. Naturally they refuse. At this point he tries to make home life so unpleasant for them. I guarantee his end goal was to drive them mad enough to just give up and buy him the apartment. Gladly they stayed strong and never caved, but pretty much lived in fear for half a year. By now he lost all his friends and did nothing but sit at home. He did get much better during this time, stopped the drugs, stopped the crime, and started to help around the house. Parents want him to sign up again for the local CC, but he refuses, since a lot of people he knew from our hometown as well as high school go there, and he is embarrassed about the life he lived for the past year, doesn't want his old friends to see the successful self-made rich kid as a freshman there. He wants to go to a CC farther away out if district to avoid this shame, but it costs nearly $8k a semester. To put this in perspective, my university charged $8k a semester for my engineering degree. He wanted my parents to pay $8k for community college. Currently they are trying to find a way for him to get into strict tuition at that farther away college. $2.8k a semester, just to get him to do something with his life finally. He says he doesn't care about the extra cost. Parents are not willing to pay $8k for his second chance at school, since my dad sees an education as an investment and he already proved once that he cannot handle himself. They are only willing to pay in district college costs. At this point he hasn't had a job in over a year, so he won't even be able to contribute. Having no skills or educations means his most likely job prospects are at local stores or restaurants. But who is going to hire someone for a job that handles cash with theft on their record? Yay, my parents were in the wrong for enabling him, and every time I pointed it out and told them to be more harsh or kick him out they just said you'll understand when you have your own kids. I don't, but I'm almost certain I would never tolerate this. He is much more respectful now and starting to get back on track, but boy was it a terrible life for our family leading up to it. If it was up to me, he would have been on the streets right after he started treating everyone like shit. That would have opened his eyes up to the real world much sooner. I do not speak to him much anymore and try to avoid him. He had it much easier than me, babied his whole life, and never much consequences until recently. Never worked hard, everything handed to him. Maybe not his fault for that, but the situation he put himself in was long in the making, and especially after what he put my parents through I can never look at him the same. My parents gave me everything: a roof over my head, food, clothes to wear, and a support system during college. If it wasn't for them, I would have never ended up where I am today, and I'm so grateful for that. That what he did is just utterly despicable in my opinion, and I don't know if I can forgive him. I had a former friend who had an old cat who was dying from cancer in the leg. Mind you, this ex-friend didn't have a job, lived in New York City in a condo alone that her dad was paying for. Parents paid all her bills and then left her with $20k so she could eventually get a job with the PhD her parents paid for her to get. They paid all her college courses and kept her comfy. Cat's like 18 years old and in so much pain. Vets tell her it's best to put him down so he's not suffering. She opts for surgery to amputate the leg with the cancer in cause. There's a slight chance her cat might survive, but the odds don't look good. They have the surgery, but the cancer spread to the other leg somehow. She gets his other foot amputated. This cat can no longer walk. Cancer still spreading, and rapidly. They urge her to euthanize. She spends thousands already on these surgeries, on top of paying $500 a week on medicines to keep the poor cat doped up. Suddenly her cat vomits and dies on the spot. She ended up spending $14k on a cat that was doomed to die. Then she whined to friends that all her money was gone and she needed help. This girl drives a Lexus and all her purses are from Coach. She collects those collector Disney princess dolls and generally has so many things she could easily sell off to make money. Hell, she should been looking for a job, but she legit just wanted handouts. She lived off handouts her whole life and she just continued living off of them. This girl is in her 40s mind you, and still living under her parents' money. I have to admit it was myself. When I was left to fend for myself, my parents never gave me a chance. I had lived in poverty with one parent that didn't even wash our clothes or bedding in the week, and ultimate never want for anything luxury with the other at weekend. With a £4k watch at the age of 14, I was the first with all the trends. I was the kid all the other kids were jealous of, but I was hungry 80% of the time, and neither parent had given me a single life skill or shown me how to do anything. My first job was in a coffee shop and they asked me to mop the floor. I had read in a book once that someone got told off by an old nun for not mopping, so before the nun came to check it, they would make the floor wet again. I didn't know how to mop, so I genuinely thought it meant that the floor just had to be wet, so it looked clean. I got a telling off from my colleague for being dangerous, and at first I was a spoiled brat because I was scared and said things like I've never had to do poor people work and I wasn't brought up to do these things. But she was so kind to me. She saw right through it, and I had to explain I had no idea how to do any of these things they were asking me, like wipe a table or use a dustbin and brush, change a bin, wash my uniform, wash up, get the bus home, figure out the bus timetable. The words that came out of my mouth shocked her, and she gave me secret lessons while nobody was around. Can't imagine what she must have thought of me, but she only ever praised me and made me feel proud of my mopped floor and shiny clean tables. When I left, I was the manager. I don't know where she ended up, but I will always be grateful for her bringing me down to earth. In my first year at university, my flat was flooded in the first week, so I was temporarily transferred to one of the posher halls of residence on campus. Amongst others, it boasted home to the children of politicians, TV stars and royalty from the UK and abroad. One such kid, connected to some obscure arm of Indian royalty, was experiencing rather a hard time of it. This halls had everything delivered on a platter for the residents. Rooms were cleaned, laundry collected and meals were provided 6 days a week. Only on Sunday did the residents need to fend for themselves. And every Sunday this young lady had a freaking meltdown to the extent that it became a spectator sport. Even after I'd moved back to my shitty flat, I'd pop over to my friends there for lunch or a brew, just to catch a glimpse of the hilarity that ensued. She demanded one of the residents make her some tea, then responded by throwing her crockery at them when they told her in the most Mancunian way ever exactly where she could shove her teapot. She once spent an hour waiting for her toast, not realizing that she had to push the thing down. She called campus security because someone was cooking food that made her hungry but would not share it, and many more, but then it stopped. peace reigned every Sunday, but she seemed as feckless as ever. It turned out that a rather enterprising resident had offered to spend the day as her servant for £500 per day. That arrangement lasted the remainder of the year. For making tea, toast, and such like, this lad managed to pay off his tuition fees and buy a few rounds with money to spare, and she didn't even bat an eyelid at the expense. TLDR, rich kid couldn't cope with cooking one day a week, paid a fellow student an exorbitant fee to be her lackey. My old friend from grade school, not even a rich family, but she was spoiled. Back in grade school she was a pretty unfortunate looking girl, constantly bullied. I befriended her because I knew the pain of being picked on relentlessly. Got to stick together with those other bullied kids and help each other. Anyway, her parents coped with her bullying by buying her whatever she wanted. Her parents had one vehicle, 3 jobs, 3-bedroom home, 1 bathroom, not wealthy or well off at all, very lower middle class. As she grew older, she and I drifted apart due to her excessive want behavior. She wanted a cell phone. This was around 2005, so they were expensive and not even fun like smartphones are now. Instead, her parents got her own phone line. She had her own house phone. For Christmas one year she calls me up and is upset. I ask her what's the matter. She says I didn't get anything I wanted. I told her I was sorry to hear that and asked her what she did get. Well, I got some clothes, 3 CDs, a movie, and some posters. I told her that those sounded like things she asked for. She then said, well yeah, but I didn't get the laptop I wanted, or the new TV, or the cell phone I asked for. My parents don't care about me. Her dad worked 2 jobs at the time and her mom worked 2 jobs at the time, just to afford ends meet and spoil her with goodies to keep her happy. We weren't friends for very long after that. She became a massive bitch, selfish, egotistical, kept starting drama, but claimed she hated drama. That type of girl. Haven't spoken to her in years. Hopes she's doing well. Last I heard she had a meltdown on Instagram over some guy claiming he could read more books in a year than she could, to which she said something to the effect of, well, I'd have more time if I didn't have a boyfriend who beat me until I miscarried. Thanks asshole. Yeah, I'm glad I hopped off that train when I did. I hope this doesn't get buried. It's a good story, if a little long. Not super relevant to the post, as the man was not out of touch, but I think you will all like it. So I recently left in-home healthcare due to not being able to lift on people anymore. I'm going to tell this story a little vaguely because of HIPAA and all that, so I don't accidentally identify the man. For my last client, I was caring for this rags to riches guy with a medical issue. He grew up not exactly poor, but definitely not well off. He did well in sports and school, got scholarships, graduated, started a business. His business became the biggest business in our sleepy little town. He thrived. He started a collection of expensive things that he would restore and sell, sometimes keeping his favorite items. This became his second job, but more like incredibly lucrative hobby. He retired at 60 from the business when he became ill. Insert me into the story. I go to this man's large but modest house. I'm shown his multi-million-dollar collection. I'm literally amazed and drool a little. I'm offered twice the weekly salary that I requested initially. I'm told that he goes to the same fast food place for lunch every day, and it is part of my job to take him there, and he can be a little unruly, hence the extra money. This man, in his adorable humble richness, pays for our $20 worth of fast food every day with a black card. Yes, the black card. The Amex Centurion card. He finds it highly amusing when the place has a new hire and their eyes get wide when I pull a put of his wallet for him. I'm then told by the wife that when I take him out and about for entertainment, I'm to exclusively use the black card for purchases, including my own. We are shopping and I want a shirt. Use the card. She trusts me to not take advantage, and I never did for the whole year I cared for this man. He became so ill that he was beyond my training and capabilities, so I had to leave. But I will never forget buying fast food and Twizzlers with a fucking black card. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe the channel.